We all believe we'd run into the burning building. But until we feel that heat, we can never know. You do. You chose to die instead of giving up your colleagues. That test you passed? Not everybody does. Welcome to the afterlife.
To do what I do, I need some idea of the threat we face.
As I understand it, we're trying to prevent World War III.
Nuclear holocaust.
No. Something worse.
All I have for you is a word. Tenet. It'll open the right doors, some of the wrong ones too.
You have to start looking at the world in a new way.
Don't try to understand it. Feel it.
What'll happen here?
Hasn't happened yet.
Hello, and welcome to the Cinemondo podcast with Kathy, Mark, and Burke, talking about movies, horror, sci-fi, unusual, unknown, forgotten, underappreciated, always interesting. Is that the coolest trailer?
I love that. It's so good. I was so excited to see it.
It's Christopher Nolan, for goodness sake.
Yeah.
Christopher Nolan.
I was
One of
trying
probably
to
the
do my
smartest
intro.
filmmakers that we have going right now, I think. Smarter than me, that's for sure.
Smarter than me, yeah. I like films made by people who are better than me, like better
All of his
filmmakers, better writers, better.
Well, I mean, just even beyond filmmaking, he just is wired different. I mean, all of his movies have some sort of weird, complicated brain twister in them, it seems like.
Like, who would do that to themselves? When I mean, he's always played with time. You know, with Memento, we had the thing with time. Memento is actually very serious, similar to Tenet, in that it does this inversion of time thing where you're actually going back in time. And he's always been fascinated by that idea. I think with Interstellar and
Dunkirk was great too, because you had 1 hour, 1 day, 1 week.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I loved that because every now and then, there was this interchange, like, oh, that those are the guys on the plane, but that we've been watching these guys, on the boat for whatever, a whole day. So
Yeah.
that's fun.
And even with Insomnia, there was some time weirdness, not time travel, but strangeness as far as like how long a day lasts.
He's
And
a
it kinda
challenging,
drives you crazy.
he's a challenging filmmaker, but he makes huge, big budget blockbuster films. You don't get that. Sometimes you get the big blockbuster films that aren't very smart.
Right.
But to get that connect, a smart filmmaker making a smart movie about smart characters, but also having like $200 million budget to do these huge action spectacles and stuff. That's what makes him interesting.
And if you don't know who Christopher Nolan is, I can just read a quick list of his movies because they're kind of nuts. How much he did Memento. He's done some smaller films too. He did Memento, Batman Begins. It's a screenplay. The Prestige, Dark Knight, Inception, Dark Knight Rises, Man of Steel, Interstellar, Dunkirk, Tenet. Like these are, and also they also have Memento original screenplay announced. Like he's rewriting it again. He's doing another Memento.
Oh,
it says for 2020. I don't know what's going on there. So
maybe he's going to release it as a book or something.
Yeah.
I
Or
can't.
it's a video game. That'd be a cool video game.
Oh my god. I'm trying to think of some of these video games I play that I don't understand.
You have to start playing it yesterday, though.
Oh, yeah, really. Did I play yesterday? I don't remember.
Yeah.
Oh, here's a note. I did.
Oh, I did. Yeah, it was a tattoo. I did.
But he makes huge blockbusters, but they're also kind of infused with this insane sort of intellect. So when I watch these movies, I almost barely understand them half the time.
But you know what else he does? He also puts I mean, no offense to him or anything, but he also kind of puts typical stuff in there too. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Like there's I mean, there's a lot of, I mean, you want to say that something like Tenet or the Dark Knight film. I love the Dark Knight, love the Heath Ledger's Joker and that whole film. That's one of my favorite of his films, and Inception is another one. But there's always there's always a bit of a human story in there too. And he'll have these tropes in there sometimes that I'm like, but you sort of have to have it. There's always the countdown, the ticking bomb, the ticking time thing. And those things that it seems like you just have to have in your suspense film. And he puts them in there, even though you kind of get the idea that maybe he kind of wishes he didn't have to do that, but he sort of does it just so that it's not completely obscure and hard to follow. He still has to have some human,
Well, he's getting
and
he's getting a lot of money to make these movies, especially I think
Yeah.
man films. I mean, he's following a source material,
Yeah.
so he's got to sort of keep it within those tropes. I think something like Inception, which is sort of his made up world, he can kind of do what he wants, unless the film company says, hey, you got to put this ticking bomb in, you've got to put in this car chase, you got to put this stuff in.
I would dare any
that's-
studio executive to tell Chris Nolan to do anything.
yeah.
Well, I think I think in this
I dare
film,
them.
Tenet, I think he basically got to do whatever he wanted.
yeah.
That's what I feel.
I think he's been
feel-
able to do anything he wanted for a while. I don't
But
think
thi-
studios interfere with him. I mean,
This one feels the most unchecked to me,
yeah.
as opposed to well, maybe it's also the source material. Dunkirk, it's based on something that really happened in World War II, so he's got to play within a certain truth. It's something that really happened, so you have to play within that world. Here, he can just kind of do whatever he wants, much like Inception.
which seems like where his heart is, because he makes these sort of brain twister kind of timeline movies every so often, like probably every other movie or so, every two. And that seems like where those are his labors of love, I think. So that's why I appreciate him, because I know that he's not going to hold back and spoon feed us. He's just going to go, I'm going to tell this weird, complicated story, and you're just going to have to keep up.
You have to hang on.
It is. Yeah.
And you have to pay attention, or you're going to lose the thread. And if you lose the thread, you're gone. You can't catch up.
Yeah.
Or you could just watch it again.
Yeah, you can watch it again, which is a great source of additional value for his projects as well. People know that people are going to watch them again, and so they're probably maybe a lot of people are going to want to buy the DVD or buy the film,
Or do what I did and like Google it immediately after I saw it and say, please explain this movie to me.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that as a negative. So as we get into it, we'll find out how we felt about it. But
Well, it's one of those films too that I love, where after it's over, you sit there for a while and you talk about it. My wife and I watched it, and we both noticed different things and had different observations. And there were things that I was like, now, why did this happen? And she was like, oh, because remember near the beginning, remember the so-and-so? And I was like, oh yeah, it's right. Okay. And without spoiling anything, there's a lot of potential of spoilery with this film.
Potential spoilery.
Yes.
spoilery sort of, but I feel like spoilers almost are beside the point with this movie, because it's more about this weird journey, because it's this sort of weird loop and there's time jumps and back and forth. Like I think that's clear. There's that kind of weirdness going on in the trailer, but I don't know.
Yeah.
Saying that that's what happens in this film is actually a bad thing.
Right.
And it's also, we've done time travel films before in our podcast, Primer and other ones. And
Oh,
they're
have
not-
we ever?
They're not the time crimes, that Nacho Vigalondo film.
Yeah.
They're hard to explain. You have to really see them, and then you listen and you go, okay, and we together try to piece it together. But if we tried to sit there, give you every spoiler in the world, tell you what happened, you still wouldn't get it.
No.
Right.
You still would, so, but it's true. Obviously there's things we don't want to give away because we want you to experience the film yourself. But we can talk about it in general terms and why it's, what's good about it. Maybe what's stuff that has I have some issues with, but.
And it's still got some pretty amazing action scenes. And if you do kind of even just partway get what's happening, and you can, by the trailer, it's not a spoiler to say that there's something that allows some people to move forward in time while other people are going backwards in time. So you're going through time this way, and there's another person who's going through time that way. And the fact that there's a wonderful fight scene.
Well, also sometimes it's you're in forward and backward. It's like it's all over the place.
There's a way in this one also, like with Primer, to create a duplicate of yourself, which is also a huge problem for, you have to figure out some way to deal with that duplicate. And, and you can
time travel stuff sort of wigs me out a little bit. Well, I hear, my brain just goes like, for a while there, Lost almost was doing that. Yeah. Like it almost was trying to do that. I wish it had been like more like Tenet or Inception than, as we found out, it's just perfectly linear. It's like that was a big disappointment. But I noticed one thing you guys probably didn't notice. Maybe you did. Robert Pattinson has amazing hair. I'm just saying. That hair was nuts.
He's
being a girl, I can't help it.
He always looks good.
His hair was amazing.
Even when he tries to look ugly, he looks good.
I don't think he was trying to look ugly in this.
No,
he's cool. Sure. He's done some cool movies.
Very cool.
Like he's a very different character in each one. Like he was supposedly he based his character in this one on Christopher Hitchens, the writer.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and he was, and there was some parts in this where, you've also seen this in the trailer, so it's not spoilery, where there's a giant stunt involving an airplane. And I love the part where they're discussing it and he says, well, we're going to crash an airplane, blah, blah, blah. And the guy's like, wait a minute, you're going to crash an airplane? And he goes, well, not from the sky, of course. That's a little bit
that's crazy.
Don't be dramatic.
And then he goes, and John David Washington he's the protagonist. And, he's the one that teams up with Robert Pattinson's character, and they're sort of the heroes of the film.
Yeah.
In that scene, he goes, well, you're not going to do a big plane, and he goes, well, that's a different story.
Maybe that is a little dramatic.
Yeah, exactly. And
carrying gold bars.
Yeah,
it's not even just
gold
bars.
as a distraction.
I thought it was really cool. He's Denzel Washington's son, which I think is really cool. And I love that they cast him as the main, character in this film. That was cool casting. And Robert Pattinson,
he's very low key
cool
for a main character.
Yeah, I loved it. Was really, basically how I saw this film. It was James Bond.
Yeah. With
a Christopher Nolan twist.
Yeah.
And when I saw that, I'm like, Idris Elba could easily be James Bond. Oh. This guy could be James Bond. Like the people that are having problems with the idea of somebody other than some old white guy being James Bond, I think that can just be put to rest because you see this totally can pull it off. No surprises there. But when you see it, this movie is very commercial and enjoyable to watch as a James Bond movie.
Right.
You almost can just let the time travel stuff kind of like wash over you. Because I feel like it's so watchable and so beautiful, all these locations and the amazing suits and just, sitting around in the cool bars and having the whole Casablanca thing. It's like, I just loved everything about the look and feel of the film in general, because he sort of tricks you in giving you a very accessible sort of tone of film that is then there to sort of fuck with your head. And I like that it did that. It's a fun way to keep people interested, even if you're not really keeping up. It's still fun to watch if you're still confused.
Christopher Nolan clearly loves the James Bond films. When in Inception, of course, everybody knows that big siege at the end of the building with the guys on skis and everything. You can just hear the Bond music in your head while you're watching that stuff. And this one, like you said, it is very much a James Bond type movie where you've got a Dr. No kind of character who wants to destroy the world. And, you know, James Bond, super clever, great fighter, suave, you know, goes in and defeats, you know, that's not a spoiler, but
And then we had kind of a Bond girl in it.
yeah,
You
it was
know,
totally a Bond girl. Yeah.
What was her name? Elizabeth Debicki?
Debicki, yeah.
She was in Night Manager. She's really good. I like her because she's not like your average sort of model. You know, she was very capable, very tough chick. I liked her a lot.
And interestingly taller than the leading man.
She's taller than everyone.
Yeah.
She's probably 6'2".
Yeah.
They didn't
They're
try to
saying-
hide that though. They
No,
didn't
I
put
love
her
that.
in a trench or something, you know, so
No.
they could walk together. He was obviously not as tall as her, which was, he's still cool. It sort of disproves that theory that the leading man always has to be taller than the woman, you know. But yeah, it's a James Bond vibe, and
Little
it
Mission
is-
Impossible. I felt
Yeah.
also
Total
like,
Mission
you know,
Impossible.
Tom Cruise MI5, you know, kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
you know.
Totally. Yeah.
and a little bit of, you know, Avengers Endgame kind of thing, where it's the time siege, you know, the time heist or whatever, where you've got all these paradoxes, you know, and they talk about the whole grandfather paradox. Like that's a thing that everybody thinks about when they talk about time travel. If you went back in time and killed your grandfather, it's a little dark theory, but you go back in time and kill your grandfather, then you're not able to be born to then go into the future and get in your time machine and go back and kill your grandfather. So how did you kill your grandfather? And if you killed your grandfather, how were you ever born to be able to
Right.
go back and kill you?
And
know?
you wouldn't exist to do it.
That's the grandfather paradox. And they
Yes.
talk
Right.
about this in
Yeah.
here. And I love how they say, well, how does this whole thing avoid that? There's a thing that we won't get into. And somebody asked the question, how do they avoid the grandfather paradox? And it's basically like, apparently they figured out how to avoid it. And it's,
Yeah.
and
Not smart enough to leave kind of their inverted trash along the way, but there
Yeah.
you go.
Yes, it's like you're sitting there going, okay, wait, I got to pause this, you know, I need to take a break.
I know. And we're having trouble kind of talking about because one, we don't want to give spoilers. Two, it's really hard to talk about.
Yeah.
And you know, I mean, basically it opens with this great James Bond opening of this big assault on this opera house. It's just spectacular. I mean,
Yeah.
just everything about it. I mean, he's such a great filmmaker. You just enjoy it on its own merit. Just take it as an assault on the opera house. You don't need to know
Yeah.
anything else, though there's a ton of other shit going on. And then you have him having these meetings with these rich millionaires to try and find this weapon. And there's, you know, like you said, the great Bond villain that they're trying to get, who lives on a yacht, of course. And,
Yes.
you know, it's like, it's so fun in that respect, just on the surface. And then you just go deeper and deeper and it gets trippier and trippier. I mean, you even have like Pattinson's almost like comic relief.
Yeah.
And you don't have much comedy in Christopher Nolan movies. So, you know, because his movies can be kind of chilly, and this one is too. It's a little removed. You know, I don't feel like I knew a lot about the main characters. You know, you just sort of, you're kind of thrown in with them, and then that's all you know, really. I mean, they're
Yeah.
not super fleshed out. But I like that he threw in some comedy that helped a lot.
Yeah, there's a couple of little quips in here that I thought were funny, like when they do this incredibly dangerous, scary way of getting into a building to meet someone.
That was amazing.
And they end up talking to this person, and it's not who you think, which is cool. But then at the end of it, this person, he's standing up there and all the emergency vehicles are coming, and he's, you know, like no way out of this high part of this building. And the character says, I thought you would have planned a way to get out of here. And he says, don't you have a plan for getting out of here? And he says, not one I love. And he jumps off the edge of the building.
And apparently there's not a ton of digital, like they really did a lot of practical stunts and effects. So I think
Yes.
that's really cool that you can tell.
That's
stuff-
a real
why it's kind of like,
that's a real
whoa.
plane. Those
Yeah.
are real cars that are getting mashed up. You know,
Yes.
that's
Yeah, it's really, really cool. I mean, that when you see big stunts that are real, it makes a big difference. I mean,
Oh,
even
yeah.
just that highway stunt, there's a scene where they're going to try and trap this car in between these big,
Yeah.
you know, trucks. That was spectacular.
Yeah.
Because they basically literally box this in, and you can feel this on the freeway sometimes when you're between trucks or something, how you're like, oh, it's a wall of metal.
And the one in front of
Like,
you starts to slow
oh my
down.
God,
And like
times 10. That thing was so like, it was so freaky. Oh, it was so good.
But there's a lot of heist type stuff in this film.
It's a heisty movie.
There's a bunch of
sure.
heists in it, and they don't all have to do with the plot device of the time thing. There's a lot of just stealing stuff, you know, trying to get in somewhere and to steal something or to do something, you know, to find something. And so therefore, you know, like you get little tastes of this cool trick, you know, this cool time, you know, inversion throughout the beginning of the film, but then there's this big blowout scene at the end where it's almost overwhelming, and which we won't go into, but it's like a full-on siege kind of a scene, and you're like, at first you're like, what am I watching? How is this? What's going on? And then
it felt very video game.
Yeah.
With a twist. Yeah, it was very like, you know, throwing you down in this big open area and you're all running into this insane, you know, weird landscape that's sort of a desert, sort of. It was just nuts. I also liked how he used color blocking to kind of remind you where you were in the time frame. The costumes were either blue or red. They had a hint, you know, so you could kind of keep track of it, but it, you know, it was still pretty insane.
And I was thinking the red and blue.
Mark's like, what?
If you're moving forward through time, you know, if you know the red shift, if astronomers know how to tell if a star is moving away from us or towards us by the shift in the visual spectrum of light. Like if something is moving away from you very fast, the light waves are stretched out and therefore skew towards the red part of the light spectrum. And if they're moving towards you, the light waves are compacted and they move more towards the blue. So when in the film, they use the color red to kind of indicate when people were moving in one direction, and they use blue when they were moving in the other direction through time, which I thought was kind of a cool trick. And they also kind of hint at that with a few instances where there's cars. There's one great little thing. It was a total little detail, but when in the forward moving version of one scene, you hear a car horn when they're in this chase, and the car horn does that thing that you always hear where it changes pitch. And the reason it changes pitch is because of that same principle of the light waves compacting or expanding. The sound waves compact or expand. And when something is moving towards you, the waves are compacted, so the pitch is higher. And when it moves away from you, the waves are expanded, so the pitch goes lower. So it goes, and they did that a couple of times almost to say, you know, think about that idea. And then later, when you see a scene that's been inverted, the car goes, and the pitch goes up, which I thought was really cool.
So much complex. And Mark, we're just walking all over you. You're not even saying anything. There's a scene where the main character, you know, a protagonist, you know, Washington goes into the backwards world. And even that's just, you know, and they were talking about like, yeah, you have to kind of navigate it kind of different, you know, like they were talking about how fire is actually cold, you know. So when and they're saying driving a car, not such a great idea because where you're going. And just him getting in there and how they shot that and how the tires looked like they were going backwards, but he was trying to make them go forward. So many smart little details that I loved about that. Like just almost happening, but sort of in this weird backwards. Like if you're going forward, you have to go backward, and then repeating a scene. It was just mind blowing.
Yeah.
It was just trippy.
And the idea is that I love films that I love it when films have things happening that you're like, what am I watching? What am I seeing? And then as you watch the film, it starts to come together and you realize you realize that whole opera scene at the beginning. There's a lot more going on there than you realize the first time you see it. There's a few other little tricky things that are happening that you learn about. And there's a few other scenes. Try not to be spoilery.
Well, it's like when you see a movie sometimes, and this is like that, you see something almost out of the corner of your eye and like, that was weird, but then you kind of forget it. Or you see something happening and you're like, why are they doing that? And you just sort of accept it and let it go. And then later it has a whole new significance later, even because you do kind of tuck it away in your head that was weird, but you don't think it means anything. You're not sure. And then of course the stuff starts coming in. You're like, oh, that's probably what that was. Oh, that's what that meant. You know,
especially during that car chase and during that fight, like why, you know?
So we should probably like let Mark talk, and also we should go into like how we feel about the film, not just what it's about, but like our opinions on whether people should watch it or not.
Go ahead.
No, you go ahead, because we're going to try and talk you off the cliff.
Oh, well, I mean, technically it is brilliant, and that's the strong suit. Like, it looks amazing, and you would expect nothing less from Christopher Nolan. So it looks beautiful. All the effects that are done, are totally believable. And you can't even imagine how he would actually film stuff that's happening as you're seeing it on a screen. So that stuff is really compelling. But, is there a point where a movie can be too complicated, almost arrogant, and like say, you have to watch this 3 or 4 times? I love watching movies over and over again. Like, I'll go back to Memento. That's a movie I saw 3 or 4 times. But the first time I saw it, I cared about Guy Pearce's character, because you're sort of with him. You have amnesia with him. So you care. Exactly. And it's a much smaller film. You kind of understand, even though you don't quite get it, you go, that's cool, but you want to see it again to sort of, you say, oh, okay, I see why that happened. And same with, I'll go to a movie we talk about all the time, Hereditary, which is a different sort of film, but you see it 2 or 3 or 4 times and you pick up stuff. But the first time you see it, you're getting the story, you're getting the main points of it, you're feeling something for the characters. This, I couldn't care less about one character in the movie. I found them to be completely dull, one-dimensional. If I don't have a character I can hold on to, all the other stuff means nothing to me. So that's a major problem for me. Like the protagonist, the main character, and he's a great actor. So is Robert Pattinson, but they're just sort of, it's all expository writing. There's nothing about, he has to explain this because you can't understand it. In fact, the scientist early on goes, explain it to me. And she goes, don't even bother to explain. And so like, okay. So they try to explain it, but I'm just like, I don't really care. That was just, I really didn't care about what happened. It just seemed, it got more to me preposterous. And like, I thought the action scenes were kind of inert. I didn't find that chase scene really all that exciting. Like, I don't understand how you cannot be impressed with that. I'm sorry. To look at that scene and not think that was spectacular and exciting. He's done better action scenes than that. He's done better stuff.
I'm not measuring him against his other scenes. I'm measuring it in the film itself.
It didn't work for me. And after a while, honestly, in the trailer, the backwards stuff is really cool, but 2 hours of it, okay, explosions backwards and stuff. I just lost complete interest. And I was really just going, and part of it is you have to be in the mood for one of these films. You really have to kind of delve into it, maybe having somebody else watching it without, sort of picking apart. I didn't have that. I watched myself. I just don't care. And like, pincer, what is it called? Temporal pincer movements or maneuvers. Yeah. Like what? What is this?
What am I in science class?
Yeah. I felt it was just too complicated, almost arrogant. And I think it goes back to Christopher Nolan can do whatever he wants, which is great. And I appreciate that. Like Stanley Kubrick is an arrogant filmmaker, but you get his stories. You kind of get it. I felt like, and if I see it 2 or 3 or 4 times, maybe I'll understand it and it will be better. But I just didn't buy, Kenneth Branagh, just his character was just sort of like, just so evil, and he's
right.
Got the
he was a bit of a Bond character.
It was Bond, yeah.
And I guess I'm a little, Bond movies are fun, but I don't know. Like I didn't need all the extras. I didn't need the backwards stuff. That didn't make it more compelling for me. But I just made it more confusing, And
yeah, but without the backwards stuff, you don't have the Tenet.
I know. Yeah, I get it. And also, I felt like. Just smaller things like, I love Hans Zimmer, but I didn't like the score. I felt it was really loud.
Was it Hans Zimmer?
The score was a bit loud.
It was so loud.
This was Hans Zimmer, the soundtrack? Yeah. Oh, I thought it was somebody else.
I think he does all of Christopher Nolan's movies. I love like the Dark Knight.
I thought it was fun. I liked it.
Oh yeah. I just felt this, even the sound mix was too much. Like I was missing some of the dialogue and stuff.
Yeah, the sound mix was murky. People online have been noting that too. And he's done that before. Christopher Nolan, for some reason, I think he really likes to have the music really mixed
He
up,
does.
and the dialogue to actually be sort of, not mumbled, but like a lot of the characters in the film, it's hard to understand what they're saying. And plus a lot of times they're wearing a mask like this, and you're
Same with Bane, like with Tom Hardy.
Bane, and with Tom Hardy also in Dunkirk.
What's with Tom Hardy?
Yeah,
He's got a mask on.
Christopher Nolan and mask.
I think it's Tom Hardy with like Mad Max Fury Road. He had a mask on for half of that movie too.
That's right. Tom Hardy's a weirdo.
Probably.
Yeah.
I don't want anybody to see my mouth.
Yeah, I mean,
I can kind of understand what you're saying.
I get it.
As far as the idea of arrogance, because I get that feeling from some films too. I get the feeling like, okay, I get that a lot with some horror films where I'm like, okay, you're trying to piss me off. You're trying to gross me out. You're trying to shock me, or you're trying to make me upset and cry, and it's deliberate. And with this one, I can kind of see where there might be a feeling of like, okay, you're trying to be confusing,
but I think it was like you said, try to catch up, and if you can't get it, sorry, you have to be. And I like that, like, hey, come on, stick with me, but don't make the sound too loud where I can't and where I can't even hear the characters. And there's that one character towards the end, kind of the military guy. I want to hear what he has to say. I think he knew stuff. Yeah. But every one of his goddamn lines was over this like this Tangerine Dream. It's like, calm down. Like, just throw it down a little bit. So there was that sense. So like, okay, you're just trying to. I had that angry feeling, which I hate getting because I love his filmmaking so much. But after I saw Jordan Peele's Us, I walked back from the theater just pissed off about that movie, and I felt the same way about this. I don't want to feel that way. So I'll just chalk it up to like, maybe I wasn't in the mood for something this sort of challenging, because it is a challenging film.
Yeah.
But I didn't find the other stuff, the simple stuff, the action stuff, the characters, the kind of the basic filmmaking that you should have. I didn't quite think this was, up to the par of other films that he's
Did it have an ending? It didn't really have an ending.
Again, like the ending was like this big, huge, battle scene where I'm like, oh, and they're trying to explain it, in the military, here's what's happening. I'm like, huh? Like, like what's going on? And like, there's it's super, to me, it was too complex. That's all. And maybe I'm just not the smartest film goer.
I don't think anybody's as smart as Christopher Nolan.
And I'm like, you gotta just back it off just a little bit. So the first time through, care about what happens.
I see the thing about the characters, because definitely the guy, the fact that they didn't, he doesn't even have a name. He's in the credits. He's called the protagonist. So the fact that you don't even have a name for this guy, he's not Ben or something, he's nameless guy. And you don't get any backstory of his, family, his life, his anything. He's just we're dropped in. He's already this badass agent. But then again, I guess it's like Bond. Bond was Bond 007.
Yeah, you just accept it.
Almost like a code name.
Yeah.
But even Bond would have like whatever. He'd have his sexy women. He'd have some time where you get to see a little bit of him, even though he was just obviously kind of a one-note character.
Yeah. But in this, he cares about this woman. He realizes she's being tortured, and or whatever's happening to her that we don't.
But see, that was my complaint. Why? Why did he give such a huge shit about this woman? He barely knew her. It's like she mattered not at all to him. I mean, I didn't understand the extreme lengths he was going to protect her. Like I didn't really get it. So
just obsession. How some people they just want something, and they don't really want the person. They just want to not lose. I mean, it's like somebody else who doesn't want their job right now, who just lost their job, and they hate their job, but they hate the fact that they lost their job. You know who I'm talking about? And they just can't.
Just won't leave the premises.
Just will not leave. this
yeah, I guess.
spherical ovular office that he won't walk out of at this point in history while we're recording this.
But here's the thing about another thing about Nolan. I don't think he writes great female characters. I mean, and like maybe Ellen Page's character in Inception was kind of interesting, but
I think a lot of what Ellen Page brought to that was what she brought to it.
Yeah, but like, and Elizabeth Debicki is a really good actress.
Yeah, and
she does the best she can, but she's purely a plot point. She's a mother who loves her son.
Oh my God, they said like 5,000 times.
That's all she cares about, and so
that's one of the tropes I was talking about.
That's a huge trope, and maybe he thought,
my son,
my mother and my son. I don't want anything to happen to them, and that's why he cared. But again. Again, I didn't care that he cared about her.
Well, that's my complaint of most Christopher Nolan movies. Is his characters, like I said before, the films are chilly and remote and removed. Like, I don't really feel invested in many of his characters. Even when he was doing Batman, I did not give a shit about Batman either. I mean, you just don't really care that much. I don't know what his tone is that makes you not care about characters, but they're just not there. I mean, the most humanizing one was probably Robert Pattinson because he had a sense of humor and he had the quirkiness and the funny shoes and the hair, and he always looked kind of shaggy, and I feel like you sort of felt compelled to always watch him because he felt like he had some life in him. Everybody else felt very, very intellectual and detached and intellectual, and they felt like they were there to explain a complicated thing that you were like, you can explain it to me. I don't really know who you are. Like you said, we really never knew who they were.
It's expository writing fully 150 pages of I'm explaining to you this thing, you're explaining back to me, and you don't get characters out of that.
Well, what's interesting is there is a genre of science fiction that I'm a huge fan of called hard sci-fi, which means sort of like hard
Christopher Nolan.
You know how you have hard apple cider as opposed to regular apple cider, I guess. But
sci-fi with lots of alcohol in it.
It's sci-fi with a kick. What it really means is it's science fiction in which the science is the most primary thing in it. The science part of the science fiction. And one of the things people say about hard sci-fi is that the characters are never really developed, because a lot of times the hard sci-fi is written by, in some cases, real scientists wrote hard science fiction. You get, Arthur C. Clarke, for instance, the guy who wrote 2001: A Space Odyssey and so many other great books. His ideas were the thing, and his characters, nobody ever raves about Arthur C. Clarke's characters. And seriously, name one of his characters from one of his incredible books. I mean, I love all of his books, like Rendezvous with Rama and, all these incredible stories, Childhood's End. But the characters aren't the thing you remember about them. What you remember is the scientific plot or the thing that happens in it that triggers the action and the revelations in it. You remember, it's like you were just talking about Stanley Kubrick being sort of
2001.
Yeah, 2001, which
characters are secondary for sure.
They barely speak, and you do get to know Haywood Floyd's relationship with his little daughter through that phone call. But I think Kubrick in more put that scene in there more because he wanted to have a scene of a guy using a video phone from a space station speaking to a family member. I don't think he was trying to add depth to the character as much as he was trying to add technological landscape to his place that he was putting us in, and trying to make us feel like this is a real space station. And
Hal is the most interesting, most humanistic character in the film.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's it's a computer.
Yeah. And Eyes Wide Shut, I think, is almost the same feeling, where it's super cold, remote, did not give a shit about anybody in that movie. Only because I knew who they were. Oh, Tom Cruise, Nicole Kidman. Yeah. It's like, just because I knew the actors, I feel like, oh, there's the connection, but that's all. I mean, Kubrick kind of had a little bit of the same problems as doing kind of chilly, unlikable characters, I guess, or unrelatable characters, maybe is a better term.
Yeah, look at Clockwork Orange,
And Nolan's the same way. I mean, did you really care about anybody in Inception? I didn't. I mean, not really.
Well,
I mean,
but he
and part of it's because it's such a
included-
big, crazy concept. You just sort of, it almost feels like they're swallowed up by it.
It's about the concept, even
Yeah.
though the character in Inception had the same thing in this one, where it was all about wanting to see his children and being separated from his children and being sort of held hostage by the fact that he was, you know, a wanted person and was therefore unable to see his children. His situation in Inception was the same as the woman's situation in this. It was like she was trapped by a situation. But I think Christopher Nolan is into science fiction and at the expense sometimes of character, you know, whereas there's other writers who focus on character, like, you know, Stephen King, who we talk about all the time. You can totally remember Stephen King's characters. You remember their names. You remember the woman in Misery. You remember her name.
Yeah.
And you remember his name, you know, the writer's name in that. You remember their stories and their family, you know, the people that they were. But with a lot of science fiction writers who focus on the hard sci-fi, you're remembering the plot, the point of the scientific twist of the story. And in Inception and in Tenet, I think it's the case where he's kind of a little bit sacrificing his characters.
Yeah, I mean, but again, I'll go back to his breakout film, Memento, which has all kinds of, you know, timeline stuff in it. But you care about the character. I mean, I remember I cared about what he was going through. At least I remember that I cared. Yeah, maybe I did, but that was but so I think it's because it was a smaller movie, lower budget, and he didn't get to do all these huge, crazy set pieces. So if he's putting those in, yeah, that takes up a lot of time. You're going to do a 20-minute car chase or explosions. That takes away from the characters. And I feel he probably thinks
story too.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So I think he can do, I think he has done, or he did it before, but now he's doing these huge blockbuster films with these really crazy ideas, and characters sort of get shoved to the side. But I still think even in a 2.5-hour movie with all this stuff, he could have done a better job for us to care about the characters.
Yeah.
If I care about the characters, I care about what happens to them. But if I don't care about the character, I don't care about the inverted character. You know, I don't care. Like whatever's going on, I don't feel any connection to them. And that's like 101 for me, you know?
Yeah. I can see that, but I'm a science fiction nerd all the way down to my bones, you know? So I'm like, I like science fiction as a thing by itself. I've read books that have characters in it, you know, science fiction books, hard sci-fi books where the characters are incidental, you know. It's like, doesn't really matter. What the book is about is some massive, mind-boggling scientific principle thing, futuristic idea or alien concept or something. And in some ways, I kind of see where that coldness kind of helps in a way. For me, in some stories, the detachment, the lack of a human character kind of makes me feel like I'm in this alien place or in this unusual place that I'm not used to. And it is a little bit disorienting. And I always say how I have so much respect for films that can disorient me. I didn't really get a feel of disorientation from Tenet as much as I did from Inception and Memento. I remember walking out of the theater after I saw Memento feeling like I've had my DNA altered a little bit. And I was hoping to get that from Tenet, but it didn't quite deliver me there to the disorientation zone. But
I think I just didn't understand the significance of the disorienting nature of the forward and backward. Like Memento, we understood not knowing, you know, losing your memory and trying to remember what you did. That is relatable. In Inception, having dreams, we all can relate to like how dreams work and how, you know, I like how they broke down the science to dreams and how when you kind of are starting to wake up, the dreams kind of start imploding on itself. You know,
and
I love that idea. Everything's so hostile.
The reason why they needed to go into the dream.
But this, clear. You know, this, and again, I'm grateful that there's someone like Nolan doing something totally original and something I haven't seen before. We've seen time travel, but this was completely like never heard of it before. I thought that was, you know, like I said, I'll sacrifice relatable characters a little bit just for something wholly original and mind blowing. Just something new, right? But I didn't quite understand, and I didn't get the disorientation as the passing, like the same space having the forward and backward in it. Like I didn't quite understand exactly what that meant, so I couldn't relate to it, how it would impact, anything outside of its own concept. So I think that's why it was harder to feel like what's at risk besides, the basic ticking clock nature of the film itself. And that's about it. Like the clock's ticking down, you have to have this resolution, you're going there and to get there, you have to do this weird trick, but I didn't really understand what that meant overall. So, it was really smart and fun, but it's like one of those, like, I really do want to watch it again. Like I've only watched it one time. I think we all watched it once, right? Yeah. It really is one of the movies at the end. You're like, oh, okay, I need to watch it again. And then I'll understand all the relevance of the stuff all the way through versus trying to discover it as we go. Yeah. So overall, I really liked the film because I liked that it was, so different. But everything you're saying, your complaints, totally can understand that, except for the fact that the chase scene wasn't exciting. I don't understand that at all. But yes, his characters were pretty surface. They weren't really deep characters. And I can understand how that affects the narrative when you don't really care about these characters.
Well, I'll just say, that whole inversion thing, it's just a hard concept to understand. You're going forward in time and something else is going backwards in time. And so I had a hard time just grasping that, like, okay, you're catching the bullet. If you shoot, okay. Yeah. I can really grasp how that works. I saw it all throughout the film, but emotionally, I just can't accept what that does.
Exactly. Like it was hard to relate to it. Like when you see the bullet holes and they go, what's that? It's like, oh, it hasn't happened yet. And you're like, wait, what? And then when it starts happening, you're like, okay, wait, so this is happening now. So they're backwards. So you're trying to figure out the weird inversion idea, which is fun, but still, like, the whole time I feel like I'm like, okay, I didn't really understand it, but okay, keep going. Keep going, tell me your story. And I didn't really understand why it was necessary to do all of that to eventually stop the evil, Bond villain from destroying the world or whatever. It's like, it seemed like a lot of work, but there probably was a simpler solution.
Yeah, there's a reason
but not
for
as
it,
fun
which
to
is
watch,
really
probably.
Cool. It's one of the things that's almost a throwaway line at the beginning, and I think it may even be in the trailer. I can't remember, even though we just watched it. I can't remember how it's said, but the woman who's sort of training him at the beginning, and she puts her hand over a bullet and it goes zoop up into her hand, and he's thinking, what the hell? And she said, this object is moving backwards through time. And so he's thinking, and he's the kind of guy who you get the impression he's seen a lot of weird stuff in his life. Yeah. And it's almost like he doesn't immediately pass out from the weirdness of this. He's like trying to explain it. He's trying to understand. Yeah, but and he tries it and it doesn't work. And she says one thing that's very important to the entire film. She says, you have to have already dropped it in order for it to go up into your hand. And he doesn't really understand her, but he thinks about it for a second and he puts his hand over the bullet and it goes zoop up into his hand. And then he looks at her and he goes, oh, I get it. It's like an instinct. It's like you have to, part of what happens is facilitated by, and they keep using the word temporal, which is, consciousness of the passage of time. And so you have to think in those terms. And some of the people near the end of the film have obviously been trained to think in those terms of, and there's some really cool stuff in this film where there's a military style tactical ops thing that's done in a way that uses the fact that this team is moving forward, this team is moving backwards relative to each other in order to do a certain thing.
Well, let me ask you this, Burke, because that's an interesting question about you. She says you have had to dropped this. So you're saying it's like you just have to think that you dropped it.
Yeah, you
As
have to
oppo-
remember
as-
dropping it.
Or as opposed to actually having dropped it
Right.
through some
Because
other
once you
time.
catch it, that means you did drop it.
Yeah.
That's
Well, the
because
big phrase
opposite
is-
of it is the dropping part, you know?
Right.
The big phrase is don't think it, feel it.
Yeah.
So I think that actually applies to the whole movie. Don't think about it. Just sort of let it happen. Feel it, watch it, just sort of let it wash over you, and then watch it again and think about it.
I guess you could enjoy it two ways. I'm really sticky about that. You know, I really want to freeze frame it and think for a second, like, okay, what she said this, and I think about it. Sometimes I'll rewind, you know, I'll go back 10 seconds or whatever.
Cheater.
And I know, but you know, it's like, I need to find
You want to know what's going on before you move on.
so that something doesn't confuse me later, you know?
Yeah.
And I think his movies are rewarding in that way because there's a few things that when I was watching the film, I was like, now, wait a minute, wasn't blah, blah, blah. And then I thought about it and I'm like, you know, Christopher Nolan is smarter than me, right? So I'm not, obviously, he's not going to make a mistake like that with a massive, huge budget film like this that he worked on for however many years. I can imagine him and his other producers and writers and directors and all of his friends and everybody who worked on this thing with him drawing these diagrams and saying, okay, this is going this way, this is going that way, these people are going this way, these people are going that way. So when these are going back, these are going this way. At this point, before they leave, these people are getting back from having already done the mission, and we're going to benefit from their experience, having been in there already, you know, things like that. And it's like, if I had a problem with a logical thing in the film, I could probably be pretty assured that Christopher Nolan thought it out already and didn't let a little dumb thing like that get through.
He's a careful filmmaker in that way.
Yeah.
You entrust him that within the logic of the film of that world, it's all going to be logical. You just have to find it.
It's going to work out.
And I guess partly it is our world, and it just got this weird element to it because of this evil genius, someone of this evil guy, not even a genius, just a thug, basically.
Yeah.
But what I think's fun, I think you can watch it on two different levels. One is the sci-fi way and just enjoying the whole mind-twisting, amazing, weird, like, you know, just the technical aspect of trying to make that make sense. Then I think you can enjoy it just as a James Bond film, because I mean, we have like we were saying at the beginning, he's meeting a guy in a bar in Mumbai. Then he's having lunch with Michael Caine and they're talking about art heist. And it just becomes this, it's very fun and James Bondy. Then they have this, catapulting up to this, finding a way into this impenetrable building in this really cool way to talk to another villain who's not who they seem. And it was very James Bond. And then they kind of throw in the weird twist, but it's still totally enjoyable as a heist film, which is basically what it is. If you just want to enjoy the beautiful scenery and the amazing actors and Michael Caine and it's like just you can enjoy it on that level and just sort of let the other stuff, just let it, don't think it, just feel it.
I wish Michael Caine was in it more, but
me too. I do wish he was in it more.
One scene and
I saw him. I went, Michael Caine's in this, and then he was gone.
Yeah,
Master Wayne.
I just love him so much.
So do I. I think of all the people that do his impersonations. I just
he's so good.
He's Michael Crosby. He's Sir Michael Crosby. So they almost got his name right, spot on.
Right. I'm not going to let you kill yourself, Master Wayne.
He's so good. So overall, I do want to watch the film again. I ultimately think I didn't really understand it. I didn't really understand the ending, but I still enjoyed the challenge of it. And so, that because it was so beautiful. And so Christopher Nolan, I enjoyed it on that level.
Yeah.
Well,
that's the kind of thing that you expect from Christopher Nolan. And
Mm-hmm.
some of the writers that I really like, some of the science fiction writers that I really love, I can't wait for their new book to come out. And I know that when I read this book, I'm going to have my mind blown. I'm going to be taken to another weird place, and another crazy wash of ideas is going to come out of this book. But I also know that the characters probably won't be endearing, or I won't care too much about the characters. they're just almost like the fork that you eat your dinner with,
Yeah, that's funny.
Yeah.
and it's like a delivery system. You have to have
Mm-hmm.
humans in there. And I think some scientists are more concerned with the science, and some science fiction writers skew towards being scientists more than they are writers. Like with Inception, he had his consultant was a famous quantum physicist, cosmologist, and I think the idea of some of these things, Interstellar, the space one, there's Interstellar, Inception, Memento, Tenet, all these
Yeah,
single
lots of
words.
Amazing films.
But the in Interstellar, I had trouble with the characters in that too, even though it seems like he was trying a little bit harder to make human characters.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But still, I felt like you were saying, it's a little unsophisticated with it. It's still the dad and the daughter at odds with each other, and it's
He doesn't care. He doesn't care about that. That's not his focal point.
kind of standard fare,
And
in
again,
this-
I'm sorry, I say in the Batman films, he's got something to go. He can take the Dark Knight comics and riff off of that. He can take.
Well, and also all their information's already downloaded to everyone. They already know the backstory. So you don't even need to explain
Don't
it.
even need to do it. And in the Dunkirk, it's a World War II movie. That's it. There's good guys and bad guys. You got the setup.
Am I a bad person for not liking Dunkirk? I did not like it.
Oh, I loved it.
I hated it. I thought it was so boring. I was like, ugh, I couldn't wait for it to be over.
Really?
did not
That's
like it.
interesting. 'Cause that's the way I felt about Tenet.
I thought Hardy was completely wasted. I didn't even understand why he was even in that movie. They just fly around. I don't know. I found it very tedious. But that's just me. But yet I liked this movie. So, I'm not necessarily the Chris Nolan.
No, we can. I don't know if that was his, everybody loved that movie. I liked it.
I think most people liked it.
It was a little
Dunkirk?
tighter. It was an hour 40, 100 minutes, quick.
No, it was like 3 hours
Small.
for sure. Like
14
3 hours and 25 minutes.
And Tenet was cut down. I think he has like a 3.5 hour. This was edited down.
I would watch that.
I would watch that.
I would watch
So
that.
maybe it's more. Maybe it's easier to follow.
The airplane stunt was pretty spectacular. Just seeing that huge.
That was a wow.
It was
moment.
pretty
That was
fun.
the.
I was like, I wish I was seeing this in the theater.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Yeah,
I
for
want to
sure.
see that scene again because I want to look in the background to
Yes.
see if things are happening that I didn't notice the first time I saw it. And I know they will
Yeah.
be. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I know that we're going to see things and we're going to go, look,
Yeah, exactly.
there it is, the thing.
Thing is going the wrong way.
Yeah.
Backwards.
Where's that guy? That's
The thing with the other part. Yeah.
But listen, I don't want to. Please, I'm not throwing cold water on it. You should
Yes,
definitely
you are.
see it. But I didn't like it. So there you go. Yeah.
you need to watch it again.
I'll try, but whew,
No,
you got to
should
give
make-
me. You
make
gotta give
Emily
me-
watch it.
Oh God, are you kidding? She would last 4 minutes.
But it has beautiful people in it. It's beautiful locations. Maybe she'll be lulled into it.
She turned to me at one of our first dates. We went to see The Minority Report, and she turned to me halfway in and she goes, "I hate this."
Oh my God.
I'm like, "Okay, we're leaving."
I didn't love Minority Report, but still.
Well,
You
I
married
ju-
her?
I just read the story, the Philip K. Dick story that was based on.
Mhm.
Far better than the film.
Yeah, I didn't love the film.
Yeah.
Far better in 30 pages. Unbelievable.
Yeah. It's a short
See, there's
story.
ways of taking down, like dumbing down a film like Minority Report, where you feel like they made a kind of surface treatment of a really cool idea. And then you have Chris Nolan, who almost makes too big of a deep story with not enough of the surface stuff that you need to get you invested. Like, you get one or the other sometimes with these guys.
It's got to be so hard to actually make that movie, just to actually do that stuff. How the hell do you do?
How do you keep track?
How do you keep track? How do you film that to make it? I mean, it's pristine. Like what he's doing is pristine looking. It just like, it looks like, oh my God, he's got every single thing down. And that's the brilliant part of it. It's technically brilliant.
Mhm.
So
And there's things in it
that's incredible.
that you think about in terms of having worked on films and productions. A lot of times the feeling of working on a film can be like Memento or like Tenet, because when you film a movie, you film it out of order. A lot of times you film the scenes that are near the end of the film, you film those first, and then the scenes that are near the beginning of the film, you film those last or in the middle or something. And a lot of people don't realize how disarrayed the shooting schedule is compared to the way the film is eventually put together. So what you have to think about is, like, if it's an action film and somebody gets hit and they've got a cut right here, you have to make sure that if you're filming the later scenes near the beginning, you have to put that cut on him already. The cut that he hasn't gotten yet, he gets a cut here in the timeline, but you're shooting here. So you have to put the cut on him because this scene is going to be cut in after he gets the cut, if that makes sense. But so when you're making a film, I think you're thinking in sometimes terms that are similar to the way you have to think with Memento or Inception or Tenet, or and I don't know where I was going with this.
Well, I think you're going in a circle.
But it's a thing that when you're on set, what I think is when he's making a film like Tenet, you have to double think about those things as far as your timeline.
Quadruple. I mean,
see, that makes it even more impressive that a film like this, which is already complicated, gets shot in different parts and patchwork, like you're saying, like in different times. How the hell does anyone
organized?
He must storyboard the fuck out of it. Like it must be like every single thing like thought out to finite, because like you said, some scenes inform another scene later. And you wouldn't notice this thing in the earlier scene till you know about the later scene. So that has to be accurate in a scene that you may have shot at a different time altogether, even before you shot the scene that it's all about.
Yeah,
I just can't imagine.
And you also, there's a couple of scenes in this where you notice something like something is broken, for instance, and you're not thinking about it, but you're like, oh, that's broken. And then as the film progresses, something happens and it goes zoop, and it's not broken. And you're like, that's when it got broken,
It's like, that still just blows my mind. I'm like, no, what happened?
Yeah. And then the other thing where there was an injury somebody had, and it was like, it's like really starting to hurt before they're about to do something.
That's right.
And he's bleeding, it's starting to bleed. And it's like, crap. And then they go into this thing, and then you find out, zoop, you find out how
it's like he wasn't hurt yet. And then it's so funny.
Yeah, it's great.
But so if you
accept it, they're like, okay, you have to get ready because that's going to happen at some point,
So I think you can prepare yourself for this film as in watch it, prepare to watch it twice, but watch it and just enjoy it for what it's trying to say on the surface. Just enjoy it. Don't try and get too caught up. I think if you get too frustrated because you feel like you don't understand it, it sort of starts to make sense later. You're not really supposed to understand it because the characters don't understand it either. So just let it happen and then watch it again so that you can see the full circle effect of it.
If you have some of those pills that Charlie took in Flowers for Algernon, take those about an hour before the movie. Raise your IQ about 30 points.
That's right. That's right. What was that? What was that movie? Bradley Cooper was in, where he raised his IQ so high that he starts going insane.
Limitless, I think it was.
Yes, called? Limitless. Oh. Yeah, and it starts.
Actually,
it's not good. It's not good. That's like if Chris Nolan made it, it'd be really good and trippy, but someone who didn't quite have his depth did it, and it was kind of like almost.
Yeah.
But
this
but
is
anyway, not to slam another movie while we're doing this. I did anyway. I did it.
But this is a film to go, you have to, like Mark was saying, you have to be in the mood to put on your thinking cap, to watch this movie a little bit, your analytical brain. It's not just a movie that you sit there and it washes over you.
It's not a passive film.
You can have a lunch while you're watching it or something. This is a movie you really have to sit in the comfy chair and aim yourself at the screen. And everything matters. Everything everybody says, I have to listen. I can't, and everything they say is vitally important. And, he doesn't, like we've said, he doesn't wait for you to catch up. He tells the story and you are like, you have to go, wait.
What's happening? What's happening? Yeah.
Wait for me.
So it's challenging, but I think it's ultimately worthwhile because this is the filmmaker who is unlike anyone else out there. And I think it's worth just sort of appreciating him on that level, even if his films aren't always easy and they're not always like the most satisfying, character wise, they're still like an interesting journey.
Sure.
Yeah. You have to be ready for the Christopher
Yeah.
Nolan vibe. You know,
Mhm.
a lot of his films. But
Keep
he's
the,
one
keep
of
the
my
dunce cap off. I think I had it on. I was in the
Your
corner
dunce cap.
with
Damn
my
it,
face,
Mark! Take off
my
the
face,
dunce cap.
with my face to the corner. Like, I can't
No,
watch.
I totally get what you're saying. I get it because I
Yeah.
know you mentioned the movie Us, and I felt the same way with that one, where you feel a little bit angry by like, are you seriously trying to sell me this idea?
Yeah.
Seriously,
You know what movie made me angry?
this is your idea?
Dark Tower. That fucking
Yes.
pissed me off
Yeah.
because that was a waste
Yeah.
of a great series, great concept, because they started in the middle. I don't know why. They started in the middle and then they just blow it by making it the most stupid thing ever.
Well,
And
how
so
do they take the Dark Tower and turn it into a 90-minute film?
that starts in the middle.
Yeah.
Like it was the least interesting part of the entire series they concentrated on and did a really shit job of it. And it sucks because they had a really good cast and just made the worst. So I was watching that just getting, I was just mad right away because I'm like, this is going to ruin anyone else trying to do this product.
Right.
And there's certain stories that just work better as words on a page in a book
Sure.
when you read them
Or a
hear them,
series.
or hear them, or a long series. But it's like things like I'm really looking forward to Dune that's coming up. And that's a book that people have had trouble. It's been, David Lynch's version, and then there was the sci-fi TV versions, and there none of them. If you've read the book, the book is like the best book, the best science fiction, but it's hard sci-fi. The characters in it are not, they're not relatable in a lot of ways. They're royalty. I mean, they're those kind of people who are either very strange. They're from the distant future. So they're like a human computer, or he's like a royal child, or, the royal consort or these Bene Gesserits or whatever. So they're not people that you relate to. The idea of Dune is the ecology of the landscape, the science of the planet, and the thing that happens, and all these things, the politics and the intrigue and the sort of Game of Thronesiness of it, which is really hard to do unless you're making something as long as Game of Thrones, But Dune is another science fiction book that some people read and they're like, I really love it, but the characters aren't super memorable.
It's a concept.
Well, we'll see what
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve can do with it. I mean,
Yeah.
He's so good.
Hell of a filmmaker. So
Yeah.
if anybody can do it
can't wait.
justice, it could, so that's hopefully that's coming out soon, isn't it? Or who knows?
Yeah.
I don't know. I
What
think they
desire-
pushed
what
it
the air
again.
did
I
of
think
this.
it's
They
gonna
should push
be
it. Some things
yeah.
should wait. Yeah.
the ones,
Well,
the big
all
movies
right.
that are coming up that I think are next in the line that are going to be released in strange ways. I think there's the new Wonder Woman movie is.
It's coming out to HBO Max on Christmas
Yeah.
Day.
Yeah.
Or
That's kind of
directly-
cool.
Yeah.
Wonder Woman 84.
So you can see Tenet is going to be pay-per-view December 15th, I think, right? Is that the right
Yeah.
date? So you'll be able to support. I'm all for supporting this pay-per-view. They're a little more expensive, but you're seeing, when you think about how much it costs to go to a movie, it's still a bargain. So when you go, I'm not paying $20. Well, $20 is one ticket to the ArcLight, basically.
Yeah. And you get
So it's like,
popcorns right at the house
Yeah.
and get a Coke, and it's, you sit down and watch it, and and you go 3-4 people can watch the movie. for
Yeah.
20.
Exactly. And then you can watch it a few times if you want. It doesn't
And if
cost
you've
more to
got
watch
the
it more than once.
giant television screen like we all do.
Oh yeah. Gotta
It's
have
like
that.
turn off the lights and move the chair a little closer to the TV, and
So I think this is one of those big, handsome, big action, fun movies that would be fun for people to see, and the holidays are coming. It just seems like the timing is really good for it.
Yeah.
All right.
Check it out. It was great talking about Tenet.
It was.
I wish
sure.
you liked it more, but
Well, it's okay. That's okay.
We'll cover it again with spoilers, and after Mark has seen it 3 or 4 more times, and see if he likes it more.
we'll go through the turnstile and do an inverted version of the podcast where we talk about, we
backwards.
give away the spoilers, but you have to listen to it in reverse. You actually have to invert yourself to hear it.
Play this backwards.
And we have to have oxygen masks on.
Yeah.
Oh, we should wear it. That's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, in our next episode, because we will do it all backwards, we'll have those on.
Yeah. 'cause
And-
we can't-
Yeah.
yeah, we're the breathe. Otherwise,
And the backwards one will also be called Tenet because that is a palindrome, as we all know.
That's right. 1010.
That's your first.
10-10, and you
10,
find out what
10.
that means too.
And
Which
that
is
means
kinda
something.
cool.
It's not just a made up word.
Yeah.
I mean, it is, but it isn't.
But there's a
All
reason
right.
why it's 10-10.
1010.
Yeah. Very cool.
Yeah. All right.
All
y'all.
right.
Thanks for
It all
listening.
matters.
Thanks
Catch
for
us on
listening.
social media and YouTube. As you might be watching this, we also will be posting a lot of videos of our podcast on YouTube. Look for
So
that.
if you check us out on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, you'll have links to this.
Subscribe,
video
follow,
podcast.
interact, write us emails, do whatever you need to do.
We have a website on the internet.
That's right. We have a website. I don't think Burke's ever seen it.
Just dial it up on your 14.4 phone modem
Yeah.
with AOL.com.
Oh my God. You've got me.
Anyway.
All right. Going back in time. See?
Yeah.
And Huey Lewis.
All right.
Take care, y'all. See you next time. Bye, everybody. BR549.
At 10.
Bye. Cinemondo signing off.